Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Okay, hello and welcome. My name's Alison Stewart and I'm your host of Cut the Crop. And today we have Richard Chynoweth here, a senior fire researcher, and we're sort of going to be looking forward in the sense that we all know that the harvest has been quite challenging. We've had a particularly wet summer, and we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on what impact that may have on what the growers will be wanting to do this coming autumn. So let's just talk about what the potential carryover impacts there might be because of that particularly wet summer that we've had and those harvesting challenges.
Yeah, so I've got a few topics and we'll see where the conversation goes.
Yeah.
But my first topic that I was going to touch off on was grass grub and the potential for that to be or to impact on autumn sowing crops this season. So the wetter than average January will have actually helped them in their survival. So their eggs are laid through the December timeframe, and often the really dry summer actually desiccates a whole lot of their eggs and reduces the population over time. But the way this season's been, it's catch-22. So the wetter than average December and January will actually have allowed a lot of eggs to survive and hatch and grow into larvae. And the flip of that is it actually is beneficial for their pathogens as well. So it's going to be a really interesting...
So the balance,
interesting to see how it plays out. But what we have seen so far, so late February, it's quite easy to find grass grub larvae now. So they're actually bigger than normal.
Okay.
Which means that they're actually going to finish feeding slightly earlier than like last year was really drawn out in the way they fed. So last autumn was actually drier than average, and we had a lot of issues with herbicide activation and things like that because of the dry, and that prolonged the feeding because the grass grub larvae didn't have food source through autumn. So actually managing cultivation and establishment through this time frame is going to be, what you do now is going to impact on the populations that you might have later on. So they're bigger, earlier than normal. They are potentially more susceptible to cultivation damage and killing a few off through cultivation. The flip of that is they are hungry, so they're sitting there waiting for food. With the weed germination that we've had, there's actually quite a lot of food there for them. But if growers go killing that food source off, then they'll actually be sitting there waiting for the crop to come through and can pounce at that point. So it's potentially one of those things you've just got to get out and monitor and have a look and make what you think is the best call. Actually having food there for them now is going to mean that they'll finish feeding earlier in the winter, and that hopefully would lead to less losses later on. Yeah. How the pathogens are going to affect grass grub larvae this autumn, who really knows? It's really hard and hard for growers to actually do anything other than digging holes and looking and thinking that something might be affecting what's going on, but really hard for them to make a call on those pathogen levels. They just have to look at the number of larvae they've got relative to how many seeds of the crop they're going to plant and make a call as to whether they need to put some treatment on.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, they do have treatment options, and I guess what you're saying is, it could be a bad year for grass grub. Therefore, make sure that it is front of mind, yes, and that you are monitoring and that you are making timely decisions.
Yes, yep. Definitely get out and have a look. Expect to be able to find them from this time onwards. They're bigger than they normally would be at the moment. So the decisions in some ways are easier. They're not looking for little matchstick head type sized larvae.
Yeah. Okay, so what about slugs?
Yeah, slugs are an interesting one. So slugs are the predominant time when they're reproducing through autumn and springtime. So the summer rainfall may not actually be that much different. May not have influenced numbers to as bigger extent as what we think. So it's really the scenario is instead of some growers being dryland and irrigated, this year effectively everyone's irrigated in terms of the slug numbers through December, January, and it really depends what happens from now on. So again, like monitoring for slugs is going to be absolutely key, especially in the high risk crops, the brassicas and the clovers and things like that. I think for crops that are following clover and plantain, the slug numbers could be quite a bit higher, and if the weed pressure under cereals has kept them ticking away, ticking away, then there's the potential for them to explode in almost any paddock.
Yeah, but it's a bit like the grass grub. Those two, you've just got to be vigilant.
Yeah, I've had the debate the last couple of weeks as to what the weather has likely done to all the beneficial insects that we talk about with aphids and slugs, and we just think they're probably following the normal cycle of the whatever host they're there to chase. So if the population's there, they're likely to be present.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's fire control. You've got the pest, and then you've got the sort of the parasite or whatever, and usually the populations mirror each other with a bit of a delay.
Yes, and I don't think the weather's been detrimental to lead to parasitism of any of the parasitoids or anything like that. So we think that that'll be a relatively normal autumn, I guess, for slugs. And yeah, so monitoring definitely like normal, but also perhaps just be a little cautious in the centre of paddocks as opposed to just fence lines and that sort of area.
So weed management, sort of, pre-autumn sowing, what do you think is the likely impact?
Yeah, so the last couple of months probably led to more seed being viable on a lot of farms, so more weed seed actually being present. Mm-hmm. So especially a lot of the later germinating species that would normally have run into drought have probably set quite a bit more seed than what they may have prior to, or in a more normal season. So actually just being aware that there's potentially a larger seed bank from this season, and I think most people have seen the grasses coming through cereal paddocks and things like this this season. So actually making sure you control as many of those before you start trying to establish a new crop. So whether that's through grazing, burning, or herbicide use, especially annual grasses. So Italian type or annual type ryegrasses that could still be flowering and actually set seed from the things that germinated in the springtime could still be flowering and setting seed now. So controlling those prior to trying to establish anything would be really good. The flip of that is that a lot of those seeds that might have formed have probably got a very small amount of dormancy this season. So we've already seen that with sprouting issues in cereals, and we've seen it in ryegrass. So I think, we're seeing subterranean clover germinating in February this year, where often that's not until March, April. So a lot of those annual species are actually germinating a whole lot earlier. So while there might be more seed, a lot of it might have germinated or have small amounts of dormancy. So it opens up a good opportunity for a stale seed bed scenario, as long as you don't bring fresh seed with your cultivation every time. As long as you just work the topsoil and just keep ticking away at the weed numbers that are on the surface, then there's a good opportunity to control a lot of especially the grass weeds this season. So like wheat can be a contaminant in ryegrass seed crops, but there's not going to be a large dormancy on that wheat this year, so just delaying and promoting it to germinate for maybe 2 or 3 cycles would dramatically reduce the population this year.
Okay.
Other seasons that's been quite an issue.
Yeah. So what about availability then of herbicides?
Yeah, so we're hearing that there's definitely some issues around some products. So I'd advise growers to make a plan, advise or try and secure the products that they want to use. So ether fumicate and ryegrass might be one that's in short supply. We've known that glyphosate might be in short supply. So actually forward planning could be really important this season, and we just don't know what you're going to be able to get with the way shipping is
and that's
this
not
season.
just for herbicides. I mean, that's for all agrochemicals.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you've got a specific weed that you're trying to clean up, and like if you need to be applying curb or something in winter, then actually planning for that now and making sure you can get the product would be really really advisable.
It.
Hopefully.
Because the prices of all of these things, are starting to go through the roof.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and like the things for ryegrass, like the ethofumicate or the Nortron type products, the area of ryegrass is likely to be up because the price for the contract prices for the seed for next year is really good. So you're likely to be competing with a lot of other growers as well. And that's one where there's not a huge number of alternatives. But at least if we get into cereals, there is a number of alternatives, but it's a matter of knowing your target weed and planning for that if you can't get the product that you want.
So, I mean, obviously, with the challenges associated with this harvest and impacts on seed quality and volume, is there going to be any issues around, farmer saved seed and having enough?
Yeah, seed crops, I haven't specifically heard of any seed crops being rejected as such from the cereals, but I imagine there will be some. They might have been given priority at harvest, but there are a number of head diseases that were present this season, fusariums and so on. So I think growers should really be asking their merchants, and if they're keeping their own seed, testing the seed vigour, especially direct drilling going into winter. We don't know what winter's going to be like. It could be cold, cold. So making sure you've got good seed quality for those times in particular, but also making sure that you're investigating your seed treatment options, especially if you're keeping your own seed and having to dip into the silo. A germination test and a vigour test would be quite advisable, especially once you get into May sowings. And you can't really claw that back anyway, but you can control the disease if there's if that test comes back saying that there might have been some disease present. You can look at a fungicide seed treatment to help with that.
Yeah. So anything else that, I mean, I don't want it to be too negative, but is there anything else that you think that growers should be thinking of, given the circumstances of this summer? Yeah,
well, I think keeping the quality of what they've got in store is quite a big one this season. So they might have harvested grain that's actually could be sitting at between 14 and 16% grain or seed moisture. So just actually monitoring silos and making sure that they're not degrading over time. So there's no hot spots in those silos, or they're trying to get through and dry it. If they're drying it in batches, just keep chipping away at that over time. So likewise monitoring silo doors and augers and bits and pieces for bugs and just the telltale signs that things are going wrong in that stored seed. So done the hard yards and kept it, so they may as well look after it now.
That's right. I mean, you don't want to have invested all that time and money into producing it and then lose it in storage. Capping then, sort of grass, grub and slugs.
Yeah, I think monitoring is going to be absolutely key for those things this autumn. Yeah, monitoring and I guess for grass grub it's about treatment early. If you can use insecticide, we've got to get it in the soil. It's really hard to control them later. Yeah. So pre-planting and slugs actually would be the same if you're planting a high risk crop like white clover. You might actually want some baits down in the drill row. Okay. Yeah.
And then obviously herbicides and other ag chems, make sure that you can actually get what you need.
Yeah, do some planning, order what you can. And again, it'd be interesting to see how the seed dormancy issue and things affect the crops coming forward. Like usually the biggest weed is last year's crop, so it'll be interesting to see whether wheat is as big a contaminant in ryegrass as it sometimes can be, and whether the grasses are there in the cereals.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Richard. Thank you. And thank you, listeners. Have a great day on the farm, and fingers crossed if you've still got some harvesting to do.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.